Pakistani army says it has shot down an Indian spy drone that violated Pakistan's airspace at the Rakhchakri sector along the line of control. The military's media wing said the Indian quadcopter entered 650 meters into Pakistani territory. Pakistan had also shot down an Indian drone in its territory this April. Earlier today, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan slammed New Delhi over its aggression against its neighbors. The Prime Minister condemned India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir in clear violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. He said the policies of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government are arrogant and expansionist. Khan said India has threatened Bangladesh through its Citizenship Act and China and Nepal with border disputes. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has criticized the Indian government for posing threats to its neighbors with its policies. In a series of tweets, Khan said the Modi administration is also a threat to Pakistan because of its false flag operations. The Prime Minister condemned India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir in clear violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. He said the policies of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government are arrogant and expansionist. Khan said India has threatened Bangladesh through its Citizenship Act and China and Nepal with border disputes. This comes as soldiers from India and China indulge at skirmishes at least 3 different sites on the line of actual control. Tensions between China and India are high in Ladakh and Nakula Pass areas in the northeastern state of Sikkim. Let's now discuss that further. We're now joined by Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Foreign Minister Qureshi, thank you for your time and for joining us here at Indus News. What is Pakistan's take on the developing situation at the line of actual control between India and China?
Look at now the situation in Ladakh. Now, who is responsible for this current standoff? Definitely India. When they know that this is a disputed territory and they've had a skirmish between, there's been a skirmish between India and Nepal in and China in 1962, then what was the need for new construction? Why are they building new roads there? Why are they building new airstrips over there? Why are they leveling all acquisition on China? China has always been a country advocating peace and stability. China has never had any aggressive designs against any country. They're leveling charges, baseless charges, that they have moved aircrafts into forward bases, that there are something like 10,000 soldiers that have been, and heavy equipment that has been mobilized and brought towards forward positions. Baseless allegations. China is saying, listen, this is a disputed territory. We have sound mechanisms in place. Let's sit and resolve things through dialogue and through consultations. But India, to divert attention from the internal situation, which is deteriorating in Kashmir, the economic situation, which is rapidly deteriorating, and the mishandling of COVID-19, and the way they are trying to promote Hindu nationalism as against secular India, is trying to pursue aggressive policies to divert local attention and to seek international attention. This is a very dangerous game being played by India, and this can undermine peace and stability of the region.
So, Mr. Qureshi, what kind of communications are happening right now at the diplomatic level between Pakistan, China, Nepal, as well as other international bodies regarding these disputes that India has?
Well, just before Eid, I had a long telephonic conversation with the UN Secretary General, and I informed him about the new situation in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the new steps that Indians had taken to bring about a demographic change in Jammu and Kashmir. I have written to the President of the Security Council updating him on the latest situation. I spoke to the Secretary General of OIC because they are exporting Islamophobia now into Gulf countries. I have spoken to a number of foreign ministers of OIC countries. I've spoken to a number of European foreign ministers, and I'm urging them to play a role for stability and peace, because Pakistan right now is completely engaged to achieve peace and reconciliation in Afghanistan. We are concentrating on our western side. We do not want irritants on the eastern side. So help play a constructive role. India is destabilizing the region. Tell them not to do so.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he has offered to mediate a standoff between India and China at the Himalayan border. In a tweet, he said both New Delhi and Beijing have been informed that Washington is ready and willing to arbitrate their raging border dispute. According to reports, China has sent around 5,000 troops to the disputed territories of Ladakh and Sikkim. The standoff was triggered by India's construction of roads and airstrips in the region. Soldiers from both sides have been camped out in the Galwan Valley in the high-altitude Ladakh region. Earlier, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said Beijing is committed to safeguarding peace and stability in the China-India border areas. It also said at present the overall situation in the border areas is stable and controllable. The World Health Organization has declared the Americas the new epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic, as Brazil reported over 1,000 deaths in the past day. The U.S. has recorded 657 new deaths, raising the total to nearly 99,000. This comes as President Donald Trump continues to put pressure on U.S. states to reopen the economy. The coronavirus cases in Russia have crossed 370,000 after the country reported 8,338 new infections. The death toll rose by 161 since yesterday and reached almost 4,000. South Korea has seen its biggest surge in new cases in 49 days, with a new cluster emerging at a Seoul retail center. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says it confirmed 40 new cases up to midnight on Tuesday. Spain has begun an official 10-day mourning period for the tens of thousands of victims of the virus. All flags on public buildings across the nation will be lowered to half-mast until June 5th to pay tribute to over 27,000 people that have lost their lives. The global COVID-19 death toll has crossed 350,000, with over 5.6 million infections. 28 more people have died from COVID-19 in Pakistan, raising the total to over 1,200. The health ministry reported 1,446 new cases as the tally exceeds 59,000. The ministry said nearly 8,500 nationwide tests were conducted in the past day. It said 457 patients remain critical, while over 19,000 people have recovered so far. The ministry said the province of Sindh leads in the number of infections with over 23,000 cases. In India, the number of coronavirus cases has crossed 150,000 after 6,300 new infections were reported in the last 24 hours. 174 new deaths have also raised the death toll to over 4,337. It took only 8 days to report the latest 50,000 cases, despite the months-long lockdown that has devastated the country's economy. Now, the international media is raising questions over Prime Minister Narendra Modi's handling of the crisis. According to an editorial published in the New York Times, the Indian government has failed to handle the pandemic. It said Modi's badly planned lockdown caused a hunger crisis and left hundreds of thousands of informal workers in destitution. U.S. President Donald Trump has renewed his commitment to a full military withdrawal from Afghanistan. Without those specifying a timeline, Trump said the pullout will take place as soon as it will be reasonable. Trump said Washington is making a lot of progress, and now there are only 7,000 American troops in Afghanistan and 4,000 in Iraq. He said his administration is dealing with the Afghan government as well as the Taliban. President Trump said it is time for soldiers to come home after America's longest war.
We want to bring our soldiers back home. We want to bring them back home. And we're not only talking about there, we're talking about other countries also. We bring our soldiers back home. We can always go back if we have to. If we have to go back, we'll go back, and we'll go back raging. And then we'll go back as warriors, fighters. But right now we're policing, and we're not meant to be a police force. We're meant to be a fighting force.
I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Clashes have broken out between police and protesters in Hong Kong during demonstrations against China's proposed national security laws. Police fired pepper pellets and arrested some 80 protesters as a debate session on the bill is underway in Hong Kong's Legislative Council. People from all walks of life took to the streets in scenes reminiscent of the unrest that shook the city last year. Police cordoned off the Legislative Council's building amid soaring tensions over perceived threats to the city's freedoms. Earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump said he was considering stern measures against China before the end of the week.
We're doing it now. We're doing something now. I think you'll find it very interesting, but I won't be talking about it today. I'll be talking about it over the next couple of days, John. Okay? But it's a very important question.
Now, responding to Trump's remarks, China's foreign ministry said Beijing would take necessary countermeasures to foreign interference in Hong Kong. China says its strategic confrontation with the U.S. has entered a high-risk period. In a meeting with the military's leaders, China's defense minister Wei Fenghe said Washington has intensified its aggression since the novel coronavirus outbreak. Wei said China needs to bolster its fighting spirit and use it to promote stability. Beijing's other military leaders said the country has to catch up with Western nations in developing futuristic technologies. PLA Air Force's Arms Chief Zhu Cheng said application of homegrown technologies is needed to win the war in cyber, space, deep sea, and biological spheres. The U.S. has accused Russian jets of unprofessionally intercepting its Navy plane over the Mediterranean Sea. In a statement, the U.S. Sixth Fleet said Russian pilots' actions were inconsistent with international flight rules and increased the potential for mid-air collisions. It said 2 Russian Sukhoi Su-35 fighter jets restricted the PAA airliner's ability to safely maneuver away from the situation. The Navy said the Russian aircraft intercepted the maritime patrol and reconnaissance aircraft for over an hour. The statement said it was the 3rd such incident in 2 months in the same area. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline says U.S. sanction threats against the project constitute unlawful discrimination against European companies. Speaking to media, the project's spokesman, Jens Muller, said any extraterritorial curbs are a violation of international law. He said Nord Stream 2 believes the soonest the possible commissioning of the pipeline is in the interest of Europe's energy security. Muller said it will also serve the interests of European consumers, EU economic competitiveness, and climate protection commitments. The Nord Stream 2 is a joint venture of Russia's Gazprom and 5 European companies. Last week, the U.S. ambassador to Germany, Richard Grenell, said Congress can soon pass new sanctions against the Nord Stream 2 project. Social media platform Twitter has prompted readers to check the facts in tweets sent by U.S. President Donald Trump. This comes as Trump claimed in a tweet mail-in ballots would be substantially fraudulent and result in a rigged election. Twitter said it put a warning label in the tweet under its new policy on misleading information. The company's spokesman said Trump's tweets were related to election integrity and subject to different treatment under its policies. Trump lashed out at the social media company, accusing it of stifling free speech and interfering in the 2020 presidential election. Lebanon's Hezbollah movement has rejected a U.S. request to empower the UN peacekeeping force patrolling the border with Israel. In an interview, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah said with U.S. pressure, Israel wants the UN mission to have the right to raid private properties. Nasrallah said the U.S., as a result of Israeli demands, is changing or raising the issue of changing the nature of UNIFIL's mission. He said Hezbollah is not against the presence of the UN mission, but the time of deeming Lebanon to be weak is over. Nasrallah said Israel cannot impose its conditions on the country, even behind an American mask. In August last year, the UN Security Council voted to renew UNIFIL's mandate for a year. But on U.S. insistence, the resolution included a requirement for the UN Secretary General to perform the mission evaluation before June 2020. The UN says it is working closely with governments in Eastern Africa to find solutions for urban refugees amid challenges posed by COVID-19. In a statement, the UNHCR says urban refugees are struggling to survive as the economic impact of COVID-19 worsens in East, Horn, and Great Lakes of Africa. The statement said the UNHCR requested about $126 million for life-saving interventions in response to COVID-19 in those regions. It said without further support, many urban refugees will become extremely vulnerable to exploitation and risk falling into significant levels of debt. It said those vulnerable may be forced into desperate situations to survive, such as child labor. Meanwhile, the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention said COVID-19 cases in Africa surpassed 115,000. It said the continent's death toll from the virus has reached nearly 3,500. More than 60 nations have pledged over $3 billion in emergency aid for 5 million Venezuelan refugees in neighboring South American countries. The European Union, the UN, Spain, Canada, and Norway organized the donors' conference that was broadcast on YouTube. The UN's High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, said the pandemic pushed Venezuelans into a spiral of poverty and despair. The European Union's Foreign Minister Josep Borrell said the EU has not forgotten Venezuela's refugee crisis.
All aid proves that the European Union remains concerned about the situation in Venezuela and fulfills the commitment it had made to serve this conference. Thanks to the support, among others, of the government of Spain, we have proven that this is not a forgotten crisis, that we take into account the impact of the Latin American countries, that we mobilize to support them and strengthen the international coalition that includes UN agencies and civil society.
I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. The French economy is on course to contract 20% in the second quarter from the previous 3 months as it eases the nationwide lockdown. The country's National Statistics Office, INSEE, says the contraction will mark a sharp deterioration in recession. This comes after the Eurozone's second biggest economy contracted 5.8% in the first quarter. INSEE said the French economy can contract 8% for the whole of 2020 in an unlikely scenario that activity returned to pre-crisis levels by July. INSEE estimated French economic activity was running at 21% below normal levels due to the lockdown. It said consumer confidence continues to weaken in May, falling to its lowest level since January 2019. The International Energy Agency has warned global investment is expected to witness a record fall due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In its World Energy Investment Report, the body said the funding is expected to plunge by around 20% or $400 billion in 2020. The report said plunging investments will have serious repercussions for energy security. It said fossil fuels will be the hardest hit, with a 30% funding drop expected for oil and a 15% fall for coal. IEA said due to the fall in energy demand and lower prices, revenues for governments and industry are set to plummet by over $1 trillion in 2020. European stock markets are trading higher as investors are treading cautiously following escalating tensions between the U.S. and China. Recent tensions between the two countries have capped market optimism over economic reopening. The CAC 40 in Paris is trading over 1.5% higher. Frankfurt's DAX has gained over 1%. London's FTSE is also trading over 1% higher. In Asia, the Nikkei 225 closed over 0.5% higher, while the Shanghai Composite lost a fraction. Meanwhile, the international benchmark Brent crude oil price has lost over 1%. Latin America's Economic Climate Index has fallen to its lowest level in 31 years due to economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. This was revealed in a report by Brazil's leading economic think tank, Getúlio Vargas Foundation. The report said between January and April, index for Latin America tumbled from negative 14.1 points to negative 60.4 points. The index has been in negative numbers since April 2018, though it had recently begun to show a slight recovery. It said in all regional countries, lack of innovation and consumer demand were considered important factors for economic performance. It said, among other factors, corruption was identified as a key problem for 9 of the countries, with the exception of Chile and Uruguay. In India, an extreme heat wave has set new bars of extreme conditions in the northern and central regions. People suffering from the COVID-19 lockdown are now bracing the 45 degrees Celsius temperatures. The conditions have made daily life difficult for people. More in this report.
Battered by cyclone Amphan, Indians are in another trouble as extreme heat wave has made life difficult. Temperature is crossing 45 degrees Celsius mark in many parts of northern and central India. The Indian Meteorological Department also declared red alert across northern state of Haryana, northwestern desert state of Rajasthan and adjacent regions of central Madhya Pradesh state. Weather Office has said heat wave is expected to worsen in the next few days.
It is likely to continue mainly for next 2 days, and today again we have given the red alert mostly over Haryana and thereafter Rajasthan, even parts of West MP, Vidarbha, and from day 2 slightly intensity will decrease, and day 3 there will be mostly isolated heat wave.
Rajasthan's Churu area recorded a temperature of 48 degrees Celsius, while Karagon and Damoh regions in Madhya Pradesh witnessed temperature as high as 47 degrees. Indian capital New Delhi is also burning under the sizzling sun as the maximum temperature has crossed 45 degrees. People step out of their houses with faces and heads covered. Many people take juices and coconut water to avoid dehydration.
The heat is intense. It is difficult to ride the bike due to heat wave. Earlier, due to lockdown, we were forced to sit at home. Now, to save ourselves from heat, we have to find different ways. We are fed up of drinking sherbet again and again, so we have come to drink juice for a change.
Weather department has said the mercury levels will lower after 3 days, but the department warns that heat wave condition will remain same.
It's time to find out what the weather is like around the world. And for the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.News. Thanks for watching.